And in fact, we're really happy to say the Jehovah's Witness leadership has been very, very adamant supporting.
Number 3, in some lands, the superior authorities have made laws requiring all of their citizens to be vaccinated. In other lands, the superior authorities have not made laws, but they are strongly encouraging their citizens to be vaccinated.
I had to edit that as the algorithms easily flag those words, which I'm sure you recognize. Now, this is a document. The first part of this is a post that somebody, I don't know who they were, but they made a post on social media about 501c3 and Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'm going to cover these first 2 paragraphs and then I'll show you something related to it. He said, I have heard the argument that 501c3 status for religious organization compromises those organizations for many years. Because I knew Watchtower had that, I never gave it much thought, being that I knew Watchtower was God's organization. So that could not possibly apply to Watchtower. Now, I had similar thoughts. A number of years ago, there was a couple that I had grown close to that weren't witnesses, but they didn't want to progress any further, especially the wife. She said that if an organization was 501c3, she says that was just a litmus test for her. It was just a no-go because she felt they were compromised, even though I tried to explain to her about Jehovah's Witnesses and biblical neutrality. That was just a no-go. But recent events have helped me to really see that actually she was right about it. Now, paragraph 2 says, the subject showed up in a video I was watching and I decided to look into it a little more. I'm not going to say much about it because what I found pretty much speaks for itself, but it certainly explains a few things with regards to the C-vid and the overall lack of criticism from Watchtower towards any specific subject. Now, that's what I want to talk about a little bit here. It's really stood out to me, especially in recent years. For example, on jw.org, things have become very soft on anything that might, even though it's a biblical issue. For example, things like abortion and gender-related issues and sexuality and things. They have gotten very soft. Like anything that's like a hot button social issue, it's almost like they view that as to get involved with that as violating Christian neutrality. But yet there are very strong Bible principles involved where, stopping short of getting involved in, say, advocating a particular political candidate or anything like that, or even legislation, you can still speak out strongly on a Bible-based topic if it's become a big thing in society. And so as society has degraded incredibly in different moral ways in light of the Bible, I've really noticed that jw.org has become very muted in any open, strong stand for Bible principles. So I just want to show you something along those lines here. I have to even be careful in what I'm saying because of the censorship. So let me do that here. Under what's new on jw.org, they recently, November 17th, under legal resources, they released these global information brochures. These brochures are prepared for government officials, human rights organizations, and legal communities to address key topics involving the worship of Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide. And in the one on frequently asked questions, there's something I'll show you there. Okay, so nice glossy brochure. Jehovah's Witnesses frequently asked questions. Scroll down. Got some things about witnesses. Do they go to war? Do they cooperate with the civil authorities? And when you get down here, how do Jehovah's Witnesses view various sexual lifestyles? It's interesting. Notice it says here they neither advocate for nor oppose laws involving this or this. Now, if you look here, the second expression I'm not even going to say it because it's just such a hot button issue and trigger censorship. Um, but anyways, this word right here, you'd be perhaps surprised to know that this is the only place I have ever seen this word in any uh, Jehovah's Witnesses publications or anywhere on jw.org. And it's amazing because this is really like a huge biblical issue. It's even being pushed in the schools that children should have this right to change, and even toddlers and very young children. And to me, the silence on this on jw.org is really, it's stunning. Because think about this, biblically, in the Garden of Eden, God created them male and female, and it's really such a fundamental biblical thing. And with society pushing it so hard, it really is a threat to young people and witness families. And to think about this, they've never even had a study article or a portion of a study article um, to strengthen families and help families to build up their children's biblical view of gender. And so to me, this is a huge red flag that ties in with the subject that we're talking about with 501c3. Because if you notice here, they neither advocate nor oppose laws. So of course they're really guarding that. But the thing is, even though they may not advocate or oppose laws involving these things, does that mean that they can't stand? They have their own website and publications. Like, I have to be careful here on YouTube because I can easily get censored. But they have their own sources, their own site and their own publications. They can speak out very strongly for biblical principles, and they could even qualify it and say this doesn't mean we're getting involved in, say, political issues or even trying to influence legislation, but we're just making clear that this is a very important issue in society and biblically. And so here's the biblical view of this topic. But you see, they won't even touch it with a 10-foot pole. This is as close as they've ever gotten, and this is only because this is a brochure that's designed to be given to public authorities with the idea of helping, to alleviate any persecution or even jeopardizing their tax exempt status. Now back to this PDF I made of this post. We'll get into this a little bit more. It's really quite fascinating because I've looked into 501c3 before and read the actual legal documents related to it, but this goes a little deeper because it talks about, in this Bob Jones University versus United States case numbers right here, said the U.S. Supreme Court noted the following about the government's intended purpose for the 501c3. That the court asserts that an exempt organization must demonstrably serve and be in harmony with the public interest, must have a purpose that comports with the common community conscience, and must not act in a manner affirmatively at odds with the declared position of the whole government. Taken together, these passages suggest that the primary function of a tax-exempt organization is to act on behalf of the government in carrying out governmentally approved policies. So this is really interesting because, they've even had the stuff I mentioned earlier about the gender. They had families to the White House and different things promoting this. And so you're looking at what's the declared position of the government and of society or public interest. So once the society is moving further and further in this direction, it gets more and more sensitive as an issue that you may be crossing the line with this 501c3 and your tax exempt status gets jeopardized. So as that happens, religious organizations, because money talks, right? So they're being more and more careful to tiptoe around different issues because of this, the money that's involved if they were to lose this tax exempt status. So he comments, this is truly astonishing. This was a Supreme Court opinion about the function of 501c3 corporations. It certainly seems to explain a lot about how the CBID was handled. and why they acted exactly like the governments. He's talking about the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses here. How they really were in lockstep. They did everything exactly on schedule, exactly with that. And then they mentioned it did not start with the NGO UN partnership. It started with 501c3 status. And that's a whole other topic, and a good one. It's something that you should look into if you don't know about the NGO UN partnership. They actually, in the Watchtower and Awake magazines, they actually were running articles for the UN as part of that NGO partnership to actually promote and bring attention to the UN in a positive way. But they did it kind of carefully, but they did do that. But anyways, that's something to look into. But let's get back to the 501c3. So now here's a link. This comment here that this person had posted, they gave a link to this 501c3 problems article. And let me just scroll to the bottom here. There's a link so you can go to it yourself. But I did make a PDF of the whole article here. It's taken from right here, this site, hushmoney.org, 501c3 problems. And it's just really it's a good little short little article, and I want to highlight what's in it here. So right here, okay, so some of the things he already touched on above in the comments, this Supreme Court case, and again I'll emphasize it says, taken together, these passages suggest that the primary function of a tax-exempt organization is to act on behalf of the government in carrying out governmentally approved policies. And let that sink in when you think about the governing body and Jehovah's Witnesses and the course that they've taken. Now, it actually has a portion of the section 501c3 here, and you can pause it and read it if you'd like, but I don't want to take all that time to do that. But I did highlight this part here. It says, no substantial part of the activities of which is carrying on propaganda or otherwise attempting to influence legislation. So this would be a violation of 501c3. But see, this could be interpreted as that Supreme Court case shows pretty broadly, because even though you may not like, it's definitely out like to say to openly like endorse a political candidate and print brochures for that candidate. See, now that would be violating it, blatantly. But see, they can say that you're influencing legislation just by simply publishing strong Bible-based articles, say on these hot button issues that we're talking about that are really serious Bible issues. But if you were to speak out strongly on them, they could say, well, you're influencing society, and so you're influencing legislation. And so it appears to me that the organization is so afraid of that, so carefully guarding it. Perhaps they've even been warned privately, who knows, behind the scenes, right? That's just speculation, but they're clearly taking a course of extreme caution here. And so they could be looked at as having, just by strongly advocating Bible positions on these social issues of gender, say abortion. They've mentioned it, but it's something that they're kind of quiet about now. And then even, earlier, what would they call it, sexual preference topics that they used to cover, they seem to be avoiding it more and more. So anyways, that they could be interpreted as violating this, and especially as society advances and people are being canceled, and they have things about hate speech and everything else. So my point is we'll see as we go a little further here, that they've actually compromised. It says, while it may be appropriate for many nonprofit organizations to waive their right to intervene in political campaigns or to influence legislation, is this the right thing for a church to do? Waiving such rights is to waive one's freedom of speech. Waiving one's right to influence legislation is especially problematic. The inevitable result has been that the church has abandoned its responsibility to influence their elected representatives. But I still maintain that even if you don't get involved in the politics of it, you still have a responsibility to get involved in the biblical part of it, because you're supposed to be influencing individuals' lives in a biblical way, right? Now, it says one need not look far to see that the church's acceptance of 501c3 and its significant restrictions has had devastating consequences to not only the church but to the entire nation. I like these points here. It says when a church accepts 501c3 status, that church waives its freedom of speech, waives its freedom of religion, mentions the influencing of legislatures and that. It waives its constitutionally guaranteed rights. It is no longer free to speak to the vital issues of the day. And that's really become apparent. You lose that freeness of speech to stand clearly for Bible principles. You become controlled by a spirit of fear that if it doesn't toe the line with the IRS, it will lose its tax-exempt status. And then it says basically you become a state church because you can't get out of line with the state. Otherwise, you'll lose your tax-exempt status. And that's really what's happening today. So they say the church in America today is by and large not speaking to the vital issues of the day. The church has become effectively silenced. There has been a chilling effect upon the church's freedom of speech for fear of IRS retribution should the church get out of line. The inevitable result is a moral downward spiral in the culture as the church stands mute. And it says this did not happen by accident, but by design, and it is something of relatively recent design. We wanted to mention that the churches were added to this IRS code 501c3 in 1954. It's kind of interesting because even looking at as society has continued to advance, it really seems that the freeness of speech that used to be in the Watchtower publications has also gotten quite muted. Goes on to mention about the church as the moral compass of society. That in order to maintain a true and faithful compass, the church must remain separate and independent of the influences of that society, particularly its civil government. It must be a free church. Should the church become subordinate or in any way controlled or co-opted by the civil government, state church system, it can no longer effectively serve as that society's moral compass. Unless it is respected, no one will listen to what it has to say. They say, indeed, few citizens in any society at any time in history, in any nation, have ever had any genuine respect for any state church system, nor should they. State church systems are inevitably compromised and governed by pragmatism rather than genuine Christian faithfulness. It should surprise no one that 501c3 church in America has lost its prophetic voice, lost the respect it once held, and is no longer the moral compass of society. And it's just my opinion, having been a witness for many years, I've seen the gradual change and softening of the articles, and really it does seem very clear to me that the organization is being governed by this pragmatism, and that was very clearly seen during the last 2.5 years with this, the big event and how the whole world went in lockstep. You had everybody from the Pope and the Catholic Church, both political parties, whether it was the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, both of the recent presidents strongly supported all the narrative, and all the religions pretty much in lockstep did too, including Jehovah's Witnesses, much to my surprise and chagrin. They didn't take a clear stand for informed consent, for Bible-trained conscience, individual medical choice, even all these things that are very basic Bible principles. They just violated them out of what I view it as what they're looking at as pragmatism. They don't want anything to inhibit they're building this. They're going to build soon. They're getting site preparation for this great Bethel Hollywood that they're going to build at Ramapo, New York. And see, that's their big thing. They don't want anything to interfere with that in any way. And to me, it's all pragmatism now to keep their own little things safe. And I'm going to share a few scriptures on that in a moment. So let's go there to just kind of wrap things up. So just to close out here, I put a few scriptures that came to my mind. I put them here on a PDF so they could be easily looked at and talked about for just a couple minutes here as we wrap up. Jehovah's Witnesses always talk about neutrality, and it's true that Jesus said, about his disciples, you're no part of the world. Well, what does that really mean, to be no part of the world? Does that mean that you can't speak out strongly on moral issues if the governments don't want you to? So anyways, here's an interesting thing that I thought about. Here's the case with John the Baptist. You may be familiar how he was beheaded. But how did he really get in trouble and get beheaded? Mark 6:17 and 18 says, "For Herod himself had sent out and arrested John, and had bound him in prison on account of Herodias, the wife of Philip his brother, because he had married her. For John had been saying to Herod, 'It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife.'" So Herod, political leader, right? And John, as a prophet of Jehovah, he's telling Herod, you're breaking the moral law, the law of the Jews, if you're claiming to be a Jew. But he says it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And John ended up losing his head over it. And so today, like with the organization, if you were to even say anything, even if you had a political leader that is advocating the most extreme anti-biblical views you could imagine, it would be wrong for you to even hope in your heart, say that they didn't get elected. That's like this extremely weird neutrality. Because there's scriptures that talk about you could pray on behalf of the government officials so that you could lead a calm and quiet life. Why wouldn't you pray that somebody more amenable to Christian principles is in power? But so I really believe that there's some basis for the biblical neutrality. We don't advocate that man is going to solve the world's problems. It's going to be God's kingdom. And that's what Jesus said, "My kingdom is no part of this world." So it's a matter of where we're looking to with our hope. But to me, they've shaded this neutrality so far over. And I really believe, this is just my opinion now, I believe from all the circumstantial evidence I see that they're doing this twisted view of neutrality out of a compromised attitude, really becoming adulterers and friends with the world out of fear of what's going to be covered here in these other couple verses. As I mentioned here, neutrality watered down. Now, in John chapter 11, verse 47 and 48, this is the account where Jesus had resurrected his friend Lazarus. And amazingly enough, the religious leaders, they wanted to kill Jesus and Lazarus over this, but notice this. It says, "So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the Sanhedrin together and said, 'What are we to do? For this man performs many signs.'" So they had to admit it. I mean, he just raised somebody from the dead, right? "If we let him go on this way, they will all put faith in him, and the Romans will come and will take away both our place and our nation." So you see the concern. They had it cozy. These religious leaders were cozy with the state, with the Roman state. They were wealthy. These religious leaders were wealthy. And he mentions they were afraid that the Romans would come and take away their place, their position, their cozy position with the government, right? And our nation. And what was Jesus doing? He wasn't going out here and advocating rebellion against the Roman authorities. They were afraid just on the basis of all the people are going to follow after Jesus, but just their concern here. And I'm seeing the same thing today with the organization. They're afraid the Romans, so to speak, are going to come and take away their precious facilities, like happened in Russia. They don't want that to happen, here in the United States, right? And I like this one, Galatians chapter 6 and verse 12. Paul, the whole letter to the Galatians is interesting because it's talking about Christian freedom and conscience and the issue of circumcision, that there were Christians from a Jewish background that were advocating that you had to be circumcised and observe other parts of the law to have God's favor. But Paul, being insightful, he noticed one of the reasons that these Judaizers were advocating circumcision. He says, "All those who want to make a good impression in the flesh are the ones who try to compel you to get circumcised, doing so only to avoid being persecuted for the torture sake of the Christ." And we've had this huge push. Some of my other videos documented this huge push by the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses that everybody should get the thing, here it's circumcision, but now it's this other thing. And at the beginning of this video, you saw the de Blasio praising the witnesses. So they're really making this good impression But why? It's because they want the heat off. They don't want to be persecuted and lose their tax-exempt status, 501c3, right? So just like these ones in the first century, they wanted to blend in with the crowd and not be persecuted. And this is why they were doing this. I thought that was interesting. Now, there's a whole larger discussion that I'm contemplating. It's kind of a big undertaking, but Romans 13, superior authorities, is all related to this 501c3, but it's a much bigger discussion. There's a fascinating Watchtower history, how they've changed their interpretation of the scripture of Romans 13 and the superior authorities. And they've flip-flopped on it. And if you really look at the background of it, there was like other motives behind the scenes as to why they did that, and leading up to now, where they're really in a 180-degree different position from what they were at one time. But anyways, here I also wanted to mention, you can see here, I had this video. There's a link to it here. It's just on this other video site now, under my channel name here, Niniron, Niniron. And I think this is an important one for people to watch, because many aren't aware that there was a governing body. Yeah, everybody had to get the thing at Bethel, circuit overseers and their wives, everybody. And at the same time that they're making these updates, saying how many chose to get it and praising that, right? At the same time, they had actually, with a confidential letter, had mandated the thing. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hope this has been some encouragement as far as perhaps confirming things that you've actually seen as well, and that it may strengthen you in your convictions in the days ahead.